The stellar Colosseum floated in the darkness of space like a massive jewel, its crystalline dome stretching 50 kilometers across and pulsing with energy signatures from 1,000 different worlds. Inside, beings from every corner of the galaxy gathered to witness what many considered impossible: the Apex Tournament, where champions who had dominated their respective sports for decades would face an opponent no one had expected. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Coach Marcus Reed adjusted his worn baseball cap and stared up at the towering arena walls that seemed to stretch into infinity. The artificial gravity felt slightly heavier than Earth normal, and the air carried scents he couldn't identify, metallic ozone mixed with something floral that made his nose twitch. Around him, creatures of every imaginable shape and size moved through corridors wide enough to accommodate beings 30 feet tall. Some walked on legs, others floated, and a few moved in ways that defied his understanding of physics entirely. The gymnasium teacher from Roosevelt High School in Denver, Colorado, had never imagined he would be standing in the most prestigious sporting venue in known space. 3 months ago, his biggest concern had been whether the basketball team would make it to state championships. Now he was supposedly here to challenge beings who had spent centuries perfecting their athletic abilities. The crisis had begun 6 standard galactic months earlier in the council chambers of the Intergalactic Athletic Federation. The massive amphitheater buzzed with tension as representatives from 47 different species argued in languages that ranged from melodic chimes to guttural roars. Translation devices worked overtime, filling the air with a cacophony of overlapping voices. Ambassador Keth-Var of the Zentaurian Empire stood at the center podium, his towering frame casting shadows across the marble floor. His people were renowned throughout the galaxy for their physical prowess, beings who could leap across canyons and lift objects weighing several tons. For the past 8 years, Zentaurian athletes had dominated every major sporting competition in civilized space. The tournament structure has become predictable, Keth-Var announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Our champions face the same opponents using the same techniques year after year. The games have lost their excitement, their unpredictability. Viewership across all worlds has declined by 37%. Representative Kilna from the aquatic Nereid systems rippled in agreement, her translucent form shimmering under the chamber lights. Her people had produced swimming champions for over 2 centuries, beings who could move through water faster than most species could run on land. The Nereid Council agrees. Our athletes trained for decades to perfect techniques that have remained unchanged for generations. There is no challenge left, no growth. A deep rumbling came from the corner where Ambassador Thorn Kex of the Silicon Confederacy sat motionless. The rock-like being's words emerged as slow, grinding sounds that the translators converted into measured speech. Competition requires uncertainty. When outcomes become predetermined through repetition of identical methodologies, the essence of sport dies. The chamber erupted in agreements and disputes. The Avakari delegation, beings who resembled giant mantises with crystalline exoskeletons, clicked and chittered among themselves. Their species had dominated precision sports for decades, their compound eyes and multiple limbs, giving them advantages in activities requiring split-second timing and perfect coordination. Elder Mox Rim, the ancient tournament director who had overseen the games for over 300 years, raised one of his 4 arms for silence. His skin was a deep purple that shifted to blue when he was deep in thought, and right now it was cycling through both colors rapidly. The Federation has faced this challenge before. Perhaps it is time to seek competitors from unexplored regions of space. We have already contacted every known athletic civilization, protested Ambassador Yat Del from the Graviton Systems. Her people specialized in anti-gravity sports, performing aerial maneuvers that seemed to mock the laws of physics. The Outer Rim territories have been thoroughly scouted. There are no new challenges to be found. That was when junior researcher Plixmon from the Galactic Survey Division raised a tentative appendage. She was young for her species, barely past her first century, and her orange skin flushed darker with nervousness as thousands of alien eyes focused on her. Actually, there might be one option we haven't considered. Elder Moxrim's skin shifted to a curious shade of green. Speak, young researcher. 3 months ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected unusual energy signatures from a system in the outer spiral arm. Further investigation revealed a planet called Earth, inhabited by a species that calls themselves humans. They appear to be in the very early stages of space travel, but our cultural analysis teams have made some interesting discoveries about their athletic practices. The chamber fell silent. The idea of seeking competition from a pre-spaceflight civilization was unprecedented. Most species didn't develop truly sophisticated athletic programs until they had achieved interstellar travel and could compete against other worlds. Ambassador Keth-Var's expression remained skeptical. What could a primitive species possibly offer our champions? Our athletes have been perfecting their techniques for centuries. Researcher Plixmon activated a holographic display that showed images captured by long-range observation drones. The assembly watched footage of human sporting events, basketball games, Olympic competitions, soccer matches, track and field events. At first glance, the humans appeared unremarkably average. They weren't particularly fast, strong, or agile compared to most galactic species. Initial observations suggested the same conclusion, Plixmon admitted. However, deeper analysis revealed some peculiar characteristics. Human athletic training appears to emphasize adaptation and improvisation rather than perfection of predetermined techniques. They regularly modify their strategies mid-competition, sometimes completely abandoning planned approaches in favor of spontaneous solutions. The Avakari delegation chittered, and what their translators indicated was amusement. Chaos is not a substitute for skill, their spokesperson declared. Random actions cannot overcome disciplined training. That's what we thought initially, Plixmon continued. But observe this sequence. The hologram showed a basketball game where a player, apparently trapped by defenders, suddenly threw the ball behind his back without looking, somehow getting it perfectly to a teammate who scored. The human executed this maneuver without prior planning, calculating trajectory and timing purely through intuition developed from years of unpredictable training scenarios. Elder Moxrim leaned forward, his skin now a bright, interested yellow. Show us more. The next series of clips showed human athletes in various sports performing actions that seemed to defy conventional athletic wisdom. A soccer player used a move that should have been impossible given the laws of physics and momentum. A gymnast recovered from what appeared to be a catastrophic error by inventing a new technique on the spot. A tennis player won a point using a shot that violated every principle of proper form but somehow worked perfectly. Their training methods are equally unusual, Plixmon explained. Where most species develop athletics through repetition of proven techniques, humans deliberately introduce variables and obstacles into their practice sessions. They train for scenarios that may never occur, developing the ability to adapt to completely unexpected situations. Ambassador Thornkex's rocky surface rumbled thoughtfully. Adaptation versus perfection. An interesting philosophical approach to competition. More interesting than you might realize, Plixmon said, displaying new data. We conducted probability analyses of human sporting events and found that outcomes are significantly less predictable than similar competitions among other species. Even when one participant appears clearly superior, the final result often defies expectations. The chamber buzzed with discussion in dozens of languages. The concept of deliberately introducing unpredictability into athletic competition was foreign to most galactic civilizations, which had spent millennia perfecting efficient training methods that produced consistent results. Representative Quilna's form shimmered with curiosity. What specific proposal does the survey division offer? We recommend selecting one human athlete and inviting them to compete in a limited tournament against our current champions, Plixmon said. The event would serve as both a test of their capabilities and a source of the unpredictability that our games currently lack. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some delegates argued that bringing a primitive athlete to compete against galactic champions was insulting to their sports traditions. Others worried about the implications of introducing completely unknown variables into established competitions. A few expressed concern about cultural contamination, the risk that exposure to galactic civilization might fundamentally alter human development. Ambassador Keth-Var finally stood to address these concerns. The Zentaurian Empire has dominated galactic athletics for nearly a decade. Our champions are eager for any challenge that might test their abilities. If this human possesses some unique approach to competition, We welcome the opportunity to face it. Similar statements came from other delegations. The Nereid Systems, the Silicon Confederacy, the Avakari Collective, and dozens of other civilizations expressed interest in facing this unknown opponent. The prospect of genuine uncertainty in their competitions was appealing enough to overcome concerns about protocol. Elder Mox Rim called for a formal vote. The resolution passed by a significant margin. The Intergalactic Athletic Federation would invite one human to participate in a special exhibition tournament against selected galactic champions. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The question then became which human to select. The survey division had compiled extensive data on Earth's most accomplished athletes, Olympic champions, professional sports stars, individuals who had achieved the highest levels of success in their respective fields. Each candidate showed impressive abilities within human parameters, but none seemed exceptional when compared to galactic standards. That was when researcher Tixella, Plixmon's assistant, made an observation that would change everything. While reviewing footage of human educational institutions, she had noticed something unusual about their athletic programs. Most human athletes specialize in specific sports from an early age, Tixell reported to the selection committee. However, their educational system employs individuals called physical education teachers, who must demonstrate competency across multiple athletic disciplines. These individuals may not be the most skilled in any single sport, but they possess broad knowledge of human movement and adaptation principles. The committee reviewed footage of human gym classes and coaching sessions. They observed teachers who could switch seamlessly between different sports, adapting their instruction methods to help students of varying abilities improve their performance. These educators demonstrated a unique understanding of how to identify weaknesses and develop creative solutions to overcome them. Furthermore, Tixell continued, many of these teachers work with students who lack natural athletic talent, forcing them to develop innovative training methods that can help anyone improve regardless of their starting abilities. The committee found this approach fascinating. In galactic sports, coaches typically worked with individuals who had already demonstrated exceptional natural ability. The idea of teaching athletic principles to those who seemed naturally unsuited for competition was almost unheard of. After extensive analysis, the committee identified their candidate, Marcus Reed, a 42-year-old physical education teacher from Denver, Colorado. His credentials were impressive not for their specialization but for their breadth. He had coached high school teams in basketball, track and field, wrestling, and soccer. His students consistently improved beyond their apparent natural limitations. Video analysis showed him demonstrating techniques across multiple sports with competent, if not exceptional, skill. More importantly, observational data indicated that Marcus possessed something the committee had never seen before, the ability to analyze any athletic activity and quickly identify ways to improve performance through unconventional methods. When his basketball team was losing due to their opponent's superior height, he had them practice a completely new strategy that used their speed and agility to negate the height advantage. When his track team faced runners with better training facilities, he developed unique exercises using only basic equipment that somehow produced comparable results. The selection committee was unanimous in their choice. Marcus Reed embodied the human approach to athletics that had intrigued them: adaptability over specialization, creativity over convention, improvement over perfection. The first challenge was making contact without violating the Federation's prime directive regarding pre-spaceflight civilizations. The solution came through researcher Quinn Tarr from the Temporal Studies Department, who suggested using the human internet to create what appeared to be a legitimate sporting opportunity. A carefully crafted message appeared in Marcus's email inbox late one Tuesday evening. The sender identified themselves as representatives of an international athletic research foundation, offering him a unique opportunity to participate in experimental sports training at a facility that couldn't be disclosed for security reasons. The compensation offered was substantial, enough to pay off his mortgage and put his daughter through college. Marcus had initially assumed it was some kind of elaborate scam. The email was professionally written, but the vague details and requirement for absolute secrecy seemed suspicious. However, follow-up communications included verification codes and references that checked out when he investigated them. Phone calls to the provided numbers connected him with individuals who seemed genuinely knowledgeable about athletic training and his coaching record. The turning point came when he received a package containing round-trip airline tickets to a major city and detailed instructions for reaching a meeting location. The tickets were real, purchased through legitimate channels. Against his better judgment and his wife Sarah's concerns, Marcus decided to investigate. The meeting location turned out to be a nondescript office building, where he was greeted by individuals who looked perfectly human but spoke with slight accents he couldn't identify. They explained that they represented a consortium of international researchers studying innovative approaches to athletic training. They had reviewed his coaching methods and wanted him to participate in a special exhibition that would test unconventional training philosophies. The researchers, who were actually Federation cultural specialists using advanced disguise technology, provided just enough detail to make the opportunity seem legitimate while maintaining the necessary secrecy. They explained that the exhibition would take place at a private facility, and that participants would be competing against athletes from various specialized training programs around the world. Marcus spent weeks considering the offer. The financial compensation was certainly appealing, but what ultimately convinced him was the challenge itself. After 20 years of teaching high school students, he had often wondered how his coaching methods might work against truly elite competition. The opportunity to test his approaches against the world's best athletes was too intriguing to pass up. The extraction itself was handled by a specialized Federation team, using technology that made the entire process seem like normal human transportation. Marcus was picked up at a designated location and taken to what appeared to be a private airport. The aircraft he boarded looked like an advanced but recognizable human design, and the flight seemed to follow normal Earth atmospheric patterns until he fell asleep. When he awoke, he was in a medical facility aboard a Federation transport ship, undergoing procedures designed to help him adapt to the different atmospheric conditions and gravity levels he would encounter. The medical team, still maintaining their human disguises, explained that the competition would take place at a high-altitude training facility that required some physical preparation. It wasn't until the transport ship docked with the stellar Colosseum that Marcus finally understood the true nature of his situation. The first alien he encountered was a maintenance worker who had forgotten to activate their holographic disguise, a being who looked like a walking tree with multiple eyes and arms. The shock of first contact was overwhelming, but the Federation cultural specialists had prepared for this moment. Dr. Velmon, the team's xenopsychologist, had spent months studying human psychological profiles to develop the optimal approach for revealing the truth. Rather than trying to ease Marcus into the reality gradually, they decided on direct honesty combined with immediate practical concerns. "Mr. Reed," Dr. Velmon had said, her own disguise flickering away to reveal her actual form, a tall, slender being with silver skin and large, kindly eyes. "You are no longer on Earth. You are aboard a space station in orbit around a distant star, and you have been brought here to compete against athletic champions from 47 different alien civilizations." The conversation that followed tested every principle of xenopsychological first contact protocol. Marcus experienced the predictable stages of disbelief, fear, anger, and finally, a strange sort of acceptance that impressed even the experienced diplomatic team. "So let me understand this correctly," Marcus had said after an hour of explanation and demonstration. "You're telling me that aliens exist. They've been watching Earth. They have some kind of galaxy-wide sports league, and they want me, a middle-aged gym teacher from Colorado, to compete against their champions because they think humans have some unique approach to athletics." "That is a remarkably accurate summary," Dr. Velmon had replied. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, processing information that fundamentally challenged his understanding of reality. When he finally spoke again, his response surprised everyone in the room. "What sports are we talking about, and how long do I have to prepare?" The transition period that followed was unlike anything in Federation contact protocols. Most species required extensive cultural orientation and technological adaptation when first exposed to galactic civilization. Marcus seemed more interested in understanding the rules and equipment he would be using than in the philosophical implications of alien contact. He spent his first week aboard the transport ship studying video footage of galactic sporting events. The Federation cultural team had prepared extensive briefings about alien psychology and communication protocols, but Marcus focused primarily on analyzing the athletic techniques he observed. "Their movements are too perfect," he noted while watching footage of Zentaurian sprinters. "They've optimized their form so completely that they can't adapt when conditions change. Look at this race. When the track surface varies, they maintain the same stride pattern even though it's less efficient. Dr. Velmond found these observations fascinating. Where most beings focused on the impressive physical capabilities of galactic athletes, Marcus immediately identified their limitations. His analysis was based on principles of human athletic training that emphasized versatility over specialization. In my experience, Marcus explained, athletes who perfect one specific technique often struggle when they encounter unexpected variables. The best competitors are those who can modify their approach based on changing conditions. This philosophy was apparently unknown in galactic athletics. The Federation team realized they had selected their human representative well. Marcus wasn't just different from galactic athletes. He was approaching competition from a completely foreign perspective. The stellar Coliseum itself was a marvel of engineering that housed multiple environments designed to accommodate the athletic preferences of different species. There were aquatic zones for the Nereid swimmers, low-gravity chambers for the Avikari precision sports, high-temperature areas for silicon-based competitors, and dozens of other specialized environments. The central arena could be reconfigured for different events using advanced matter manipulation technology. Within minutes, the same space could be transformed from a swimming pool to a running track to an anti-gravity obstacle course. The seating area accommodated beings of every size and shape, with environmental controls that allowed each species to remain comfortable regardless of the arena's current configuration. Marcus spent his first day exploring the facility with a sense of wonder that reminded the Federation staff why they found humans so interesting. Where most beings focused on the impressive technology, Marcus was fascinated by the design principles that made different athletic activities possible. "This is incredible," he said, while examining the track surface in one of the running areas. "The material adapts to provide optimal traction for different types of locomotion. You could run a race with competitors who have completely different foot structures, and everyone would have equal footing." The Federation engineers who designed the facility had never considered this perspective. They had built the arena to accommodate different species' needs, but they hadn't realized they had also created the ultimate testing ground for adaptive athletic approaches. Marcus's first meeting with his competitors was scheduled for 3 days after his arrival, giving him time to acclimate to the station's environment and review the tournament format. The event would consist of 5 different challenges, each designed to test different aspects of athletic ability: speed, strength, precision, endurance, and adaptability. The Adaptability Challenge was a recent addition to Galactic competition, created specifically for this exhibition. Traditional tournaments focused on established skills that could be measured and compared directly. The adaptability event would present competitors with obstacles and objectives that none of them had encountered before, requiring them to develop new techniques during the competition itself. "It's the closest we could come to replicating the unpredictable conditions that characterize human sports," explained tournament director Moxrim during their first meeting. "We wanted to create a scenario where your species' apparent advantages might actually prove relevant." Marcus appreciated the consideration, but he was more interested in understanding the other events. The speed challenge would take place on a track that changed configuration during the race, requiring runners to adapt their technique as they moved. The strength event involved manipulating objects of various shapes and weights in ways that couldn't be solved through raw power alone. The precision challenge required competitors to achieve accurate results while dealing with constantly changing conditions. The endurance event would test not just physical stamina, but the ability to maintain performance while facing unexpected obstacles. "These events all have something in common," Marcus observed after reviewing the details. "They're designed to test adaptability rather than just specialized skills. That's unusual for athletic competition." "It is unprecedented in galactic sports," Director Moxrim confirmed. "We designed this tournament specifically to test whether your species' approach to athletics could provide genuine competition for our established champions." The meeting with the other competitors took place in a neutral conference area designed to accommodate beings of different sizes and environmental needs. Marcus found himself facing representatives from 7 different species, each one a champion in their respective field. Keth-Var Jr., son of the ambassador who had proposed this tournament, represented the Zentaurian Empire in the speed events. He stood nearly 8 feet tall with a muscular frame that seemed designed for efficient movement. His people had dominated running competitions for decades through training methods that achieved perfect biomechanical efficiency. Champion Quilsa from the Nereid systems would compete in the endurance event. Her aquatic nature gave her advantages in events requiring sustained effort, as her physiology was adapted for continuous motion through resistant environments. She could maintain peak performance levels far longer than most land-based species. Master Thorndex from the Silicon Confederacy was the strength competitor. His rock-like composition made him incredibly durable and powerful, capable of manipulating massive weights with ease. His training focused on precise application of force to achieve maximum efficiency. Precision seeker Yithkol from the Avakari Collective brought compound eyes and multiple limbs to competitions requiring exact movements and split-second timing. Her species had evolved perfect hand-eye coordination through millions of years of hunting prey with lightning-fast reflexes. The other competitors represented equally impressive abilities from their respective species. Each had spent decades perfecting techniques that had remained essentially unchanged for generations. They were the pinnacle of what galactic athletics had achieved through methodical training and optimization. The initial reaction to Marcus was predictably dismissive. Compared to beings who stood 8 feet tall, possessed multiple limbs, or could manipulate matter at the molecular level, a 42-year-old human gym teacher seemed laughably outmatched. Several competitors expressed confusion about why he had been selected for this exhibition. "With respect to your species," Keth-Var Jr. said, his translator rendering his tone as politely condescending, "I fail to understand what challenge you might provide. Our preliminary analysis suggests that human physical capabilities fall well below galactic averages in every measurable category." Marcus had expected this reaction. He had spent his career working with students who were often dismissed by others as lacking athletic potential. The key was demonstrating value through results rather than arguments. "You're absolutely right," Marcus replied calmly. "Humans aren't particularly fast, strong, or precise compared to your species. But physical capabilities are only part of athletic competition. The other part is how you use what you have." Precision seeker Yithkol's compound eyes focused on him with what the translator indicated was curiosity. "Elaborate on this concept." "In human athletics, we have a saying, 'It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog.' Physical advantages don't guarantee victory if you can't adapt to changing circumstances or find creative solutions to unexpected problems." The alien competitors exchanged what Marcus interpreted as skeptical glances. The concept of overcoming physical limitations through strategy and adaptation was apparently foreign to their training philosophy. Master Thorndex's rocky surface rumbled as he spoke. "Athletic competition is based on measurable capabilities. Superior technique combined with superior physical gifts produces predictable results. Randomness and improvisation introduce inefficiencies that reduce performance." "Maybe in your competitions," Marcus said. "But what happens when you face something you haven't trained for? When the rules change in the middle of the game? When your perfect technique doesn't work because the situation is different from anything you've practiced?" These questions touched on something that had been troubling galactic athletics for years. Competition had become increasingly predictable because all participants used similar training methods and competed under identical conditions. The idea of deliberately introducing variables that would force adaptation was revolutionary. Champion Kilsa's translucent form shimmered as she considered this perspective. "Human athletics deliberately incorporates unpredictable elements?" "All the time," Marcus confirmed. "We practice for situations that might never happen because we know that real competition doesn't follow practice scenarios. The best athletes are those who can perform well even when everything goes wrong." The conversation continued for over an hour, with the alien competitors asking increasingly detailed questions about human training methods. They seemed particularly fascinated by the concept of practicing for failure, deliberately creating scenarios where athletes had to overcome disadvantages or equipment problems. By the end of the meeting, the atmosphere had shifted from dismissive to cautiously interested. The alien champions still believed their superior physical capabilities would ensure victory, but they were beginning to understand that this exhibition might be more challenging than they had initially assumed. Tournament director Mox Rim announced that the competition would begin in 3 days, allowing all participants time for final preparations. The events would be broadcast across the galaxy, marking the first time that representatives from different species would compete in athletic events specifically designed to test adaptability rather than specialized skills. Marcus spent those 3 days observing his competitors' training sessions and analyzing their techniques. What he saw confirmed his initial assessment. These beings had achieved remarkable efficiency through repetitive practice, but they struggled when faced with even minor variations in their routines. Keth-Var Jr.'s running form was perfectly optimized for standard track surfaces and consistent gravity. When Marcus watched him practice on surfaces with varying texture, the Zentaurian maintained the same stride pattern, even though it was clearly less effective under the changed conditions. Precision seeker Yithkol could hit targets with incredible accuracy under controlled conditions, but when practice targets were moved unexpectedly or lighting conditions changed, her performance declined noticeably. She seemed unable to adjust her technique to compensate for variables she hadn't specifically trained for. The pattern was consistent across all the competitors. They had perfected their abilities for specific, predictable scenarios, but they lacked the adaptability that human athletes developed through training under constantly changing conditions. On the night before competition began, Marcus called his wife Sarah using the communication system the Federation had provided. The technology allowed real-time conversation across interstellar distances, though Sarah believed she was talking to her husband at a secret training facility somewhere on Earth. "How are you feeling about tomorrow?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying the concern that had been present since he left for this mysterious opportunity. "Nervous," Marcus admitted. "I'm competing against athletes who are physically superior to humans in every way. But I think I understand something about competition that they don't." "What's that?" Marcus looked out the observation window at the stars surrounding the stellar Colosseum, still amazed by the reality of his situation. "I've spent 20 years teaching kids who weren't naturally gifted athletes. The ones who succeeded weren't necessarily the fastest or strongest. They were the ones who could adapt, who could find ways to improve even when they thought they'd reached their limits. And you think that applies here? I think these aliens have never faced real adversity in competition. They've perfected their techniques against predictable opponents using established methods. Tomorrow they're going to discover what happens when the rules change." Sarah's laugh came across the communication link with familiar warmth. "I love you, Marcus. Give them hell." As Marcus prepared for sleep in his quarters aboard the stellar Colosseum, he thought about the journey that had brought him here. 3 months ago, he had been worried about whether his high school basketball team could make it to the state playoffs. Now he was representing his entire species in a competition that could change how the galaxy thought about athletic achievement. The irony wasn't lost on him. He wasn't Earth's greatest athlete, its fastest runner, or its strongest competitor. He was a middle-aged gym teacher who had spent his career helping ordinary people discover they could accomplish extraordinary things. Tomorrow, he would find out if those same principles could work on an intergalactic stage. The preliminary events were scheduled to begin at 0800 station time, with representatives from across the galaxy gathering to witness something unprecedented in the history of interstellar athletics. For the first time, pure physical superiority would compete against adaptability and creative problem-solving. Marcus fell asleep wondering which approach would prove more effective when faced with challenges that none of them had ever encountered before. The morning of competition arrived with the stellar Colosseum buzzing with energy from thousands of spectators representing dozens of species. Marcus stood at the edge of the central arena, watching as the space transformed itself into the first challenge venue. The floor shifted and rippled like liquid metal, before solidifying into a track that seemed to defy geometric logic. Curves that twisted in impossible directions, straightaways that sloped at varying angles, and surface textures that changed every few meters. Keth-Var Jr. stretched beside the starting line, his 8-foot frame moving through warm-up routines that had been perfected over decades. Every movement was precise, calculated, and identical to the form he had displayed in practice. The other speed competitors from various species performed similar rituals, each one following training patterns that had produced galactic records. Marcus jogged in place, drawing curious stares from spectators who couldn't understand why the human looked so relaxed. Where the alien athletes focused on maintaining perfect form during their preparations, Marcus seemed to be deliberately introducing variations into his movements, changing his stride length, adjusting his arm position, even running backwards for short distances. "The human appears to be warming up incorrectly," observed sports analyst Vextor from the broadcast booth. Optimal preparation requires consistent repetition of the movement patterns that will be used during competition. Co-analyst Nimpel from the Regilian Network chittered in agreement. Our biomechanical experts predict the human will finish last by a significant margin. The track configuration favors competitors with longer stride lengths and optimized muscle efficiency. What the analysts didn't understand was that Marcus was preparing for something entirely different than his competitors. While they rehearsed perfect technique for a standard race, he was training his nervous system to adapt to whatever surprises the track might present. Tournament director Max Rim announced the rules through the arena's translation system. The speed challenge would be a 3-kilometer race on a track that would change configuration during the event. Runners would need to navigate obstacles, surface variations, and geometric shifts while maintaining maximum velocity. The race began with a sound that resonated across multiple frequencies to accommodate different species' hearing ranges. Keth-Var Jr. immediately took the lead, his powerful legs carrying him forward with mechanical precision. The other competitors followed in a tight pack, each one maintaining the perfect form their species had developed over centuries of athletic optimization. Marcus started near the back of the group, but he wasn't focused on keeping pace with the leaders. Instead, he watched the track ahead, analyzing how the surface changes affected the other runners' performance. When Keth-Var's perfect stride pattern hit the first texture variation, the Zentaurian stumbled slightly as his technique failed to adapt to the new conditions. The first major track transformation occurred at the 500-meter mark. The surface suddenly shifted from solid metal to a spongy material that absorbed energy differently. Most competitors maintained their established running form, losing speed as their techniques became less efficient on the new surface. Marcus had been expecting something like this. Instead of fighting the change, he adjusted his stride to take advantage of the surface's energy absorption properties, using shorter, quicker steps that maintained momentum while the other runners struggled with form that was no longer optimal. By the 1-kilometer mark, Marcus had moved from last place to the middle of the pack. The alien competitors were beginning to show signs of confusion as their perfect techniques proved inadequate for the constantly changing conditions. Precision seeker Ythkol was competing in the next event, but she watched the race with growing concern. The human's performance was improving as the track became more challenging, while her fellow competitors lost efficiency with each new obstacle. The second major transformation occurred when the track suddenly split into multiple paths of different lengths and difficulty levels. The most direct route required runners to navigate a series of low barriers, while longer paths offered clearer passage but added distance to the race. Most competitors instinctively chose the shortest route, their training having emphasized efficiency above all else. Marcus evaluated the options quickly and chose a middle path that seemed to offer the best combination of distance and navigability for his running style. This decision proved crucial when the barriers on the shortest path began moving randomly, forcing the lead runners to break stride repeatedly as they tried to maintain their optimized jumping techniques. Marcus's path remained relatively stable, allowing him to pass several competitors who were struggling with the unexpected obstacles. "The human is demonstrating highly irregular racing strategy," announced analyst Vextor with obvious puzzlement. "His path selection violates all principles of efficient route optimization." "Yet his position in the race continues to improve," Nimpel observed. "This outcome contradicts our predictive models." Keth-Var Jr. was still in the lead as they approached the final kilometer, but his perfect form was showing signs of strain. Each track change required him to modify his technique slightly, and these constant adjustments were accumulating into noticeable fatigue. His training had prepared him to run efficiently under ideal conditions, not to adapt continuously to new challenges. The final transformation was the most dramatic yet. The track surface became a series of platforms that tilted and rotated unpredictably, requiring runners to adjust their balance and stride pattern with every step. Most competitors slowed dramatically as they tried to maintain stability, while preserving their optimized running form. Marcus had trained his high school athletes on similar unstable surfaces, using balance boards and uneven terrain. The principles were the same: stay relaxed, react to changes rather than fighting them, and trust your body's natural ability to adapt. Instead of slowing down, he actually increased his pace as he found the rhythm of movement that worked with the shifting platforms rather than against them. With 200 meters remaining, Marcus passed Keth-Var Jr., who was struggling to maintain his perfect stride pattern on surfaces that changed with every step. The Zentaurian's technique, optimized for consistency, couldn't adapt quickly enough to the constant variations. The crowd fell silent as the human gym teacher crossed the finish line first, followed by competitors whose superior physical capabilities had been negated by their inability to adapt to changing conditions. Marcus wasn't even breathing heavily. His adaptive running style had been more energy efficient than the rigid techniques his competitors had used. "This result is statistically impossible," analyst Vextor announced to the stunned audience. "Our calculations indicated the human should have finished with the slowest time." Tournament director Max Rim studied the race data with fascination. The human had covered the same distance as the other competitors, but he had done so using a completely different approach to movement and energy management. Where other runners had fought against the track's changes, Marcus had incorporated them into his running strategy. The strength competition took place an hour later in an arena reconfigured to test power application rather than speed. Master Thorndex approached the challenge with confidence born from decades of dominating similar events. His rock-like physiology could generate enormous force, and his training had focused on maximizing power output through optimal leverage and technique. The strength challenge didn't involve simply lifting heavy objects, which would have made the outcome predictable based on each competitor's physical capabilities. Instead, participants had to manipulate a series of objects with different shapes, weights, and handling characteristics while achieving specific positioning goals within time limits. Master Thorndex began the event by applying his maximum force to the first object, a massive crystalline structure that needed to be moved to a designated location. His approach was straightforward: generate enough power to overcome the object's resistance and push it into position through brute strength. Marcus observed the first few attempts by other competitors, noting how they all used similar approaches based on overwhelming force application. When his turn came, he spent several minutes examining the objects and the positioning requirements before beginning. The first object that had given Master Thorndex difficulty was indeed massive, but Marcus noticed that it was perfectly balanced around a central axis. Instead of trying to overcome its weight through raw power, he applied force at specific points that caused the object to rotate smoothly into position using its own momentum. "The human is using leverage principles," observed Dr. Yinka from the Biomechanics Institute. "However, his technique should not be effective against objects of this mass." What Dr. Yinka didn't understand was that Marcus had spent years teaching physics through practical application in gym classes. He understood how to use mechanical advantage, momentum conservation, and energy transfer to accomplish tasks that seemed to require greater strength than he possessed. The second object was a series of interconnected components that needed to be separated and rearranged. Other competitors had approached this by applying force to individual pieces, often causing the entire assembly to move in undesired directions. Marcus studied the connections and discovered that applying pressure at one specific point caused the entire structure to disassemble itself sequentially. With each object, Marcus demonstrated solutions that required less force but more understanding of mechanical principles. His competitors possessed superior strength, but they had been trained to overcome obstacles through power rather than to understand how those obstacles actually worked. Master Thorndex watched with growing amazement as the human completed the challenge using perhaps 1/10 the force that the Confederacy champion had applied. The results were achieved faster and with greater precision, demonstrating that understanding could be more valuable than raw capability. The precision event tested precision seeker Yithkol's compound eyes and multiple limbs against Marcus's supposedly inferior human coordination. The challenge required competitors to manipulate objects through a series of complex maneuvers while conditions changed continuously around them. Yithkol approached the task with the confidence that came from perfect hand-eye coordination and limbs that could move independently with mechanical precision. Her technique involved calculating exact movements and executing them flawlessly, a method that had never failed in traditional competitions. The challenge began with targets that moved in predictable patterns, allowing competitors to calculate intercept trajectories and timing with mathematical precision. Yithkol performed perfectly, her movements so exact that they seemed almost robotic in their efficiency. Then the conditions began changing. Lighting shifted, creating shadows that altered depth perception. Air currents introduced variables that affected projectile flight paths. The targets themselves began moving in random patterns rather than following predictable routes. Yith-Kol's precision-based approach began showing limitations. Her calculations were perfect for the original conditions, but when those conditions changed, her technique couldn't adapt quickly enough. She continued trying to use exact mathematical approaches for situations that no longer followed mathematical rules. Marcus had coached basketball players who needed to make shots while defenders moved unpredictably and crowd noise affected concentration. His approach emphasized developing intuitive feel for the activity rather than relying on conscious calculation for every movement. When the conditions changed, Marcus adjusted naturally, using peripheral vision and instinctive timing rather than trying to calculate solutions for every variable. His accuracy was initially lower than Yith-Kol's mathematical precision, but it remained consistent as conditions became more chaotic. The final portion of the precision challenge introduced obstacles that blocked direct paths to targets, requiring competitors to use indirect approaches and creative solutions. Yith-Kol's multiple limbs should have given her advantages, but her training had focused on optimizing direct approaches rather than developing alternative strategies. Marcus began using bank shots, ricochet angles, and coordination between multiple projectiles to achieve results that seemed impossible through direct approaches. These were techniques he had learned from trick shot artists and playground basketball games, methods that traditional athletic training considered inefficient, but that worked when conventional approaches failed. "The human is achieving precision through imprecision," announced a confused analyst Vextor. His techniques violate optimal targeting principles, yet his results equal or exceed those of competitors with superior sensory capabilities. Champion Kilsa's endurance event tested her aquatic physiology against Marcus's land-based biology in a challenge that should have been no contest. The Nereid could maintain peak performance levels far longer than most species, with cardiovascular and metabolic systems adapted for continuous activity. The endurance challenge wasn't simply a test of how long competitors could maintain a specific activity. Instead, it required sustained performance across multiple different tasks, with the type of activity changing every few minutes to prevent competitors from settling into optimized rhythms. Kilsa began the event by establishing a pace that she could theoretically maintain for hours, drawing on training methods that had produced galactic endurance records. Her approach was to find the optimal energy expenditure level and maintain it consistently, regardless of the specific activity required. Marcus had learned endurance training from coaching cross-country runners and wrestlers who needed to maintain performance across varying intensities and activity types. His approach emphasized energy management and recovery during transitions, rather than maintaining constant output levels. As the challenge progressed through swimming, running, climbing, and coordination tasks, Marcus's strategy of varying his effort level based on each activity's demands proved more sustainable than Kilsa's consistent high-output approach. While she maintained perfect form and intensity, Marcus conserved energy during easier tasks and applied maximum effort only when necessary. The turning point came when the challenge introduced stress factors, environmental changes, time pressure, and unexpected obstacles that forced competitors to adapt their strategies mid-activity. Kilsa's training had prepared her for sustained effort under ideal conditions, but not for the metabolic cost of constant adaptation. Marcus had trained athletes who needed to perform under pressure, dealing with hostile crowds, weather changes, and equipment problems. His conditioning included mental and emotional stress management, allowing him to maintain performance efficiency even when circumstances became chaotic. By the final hour of the endurance challenge, Kilsa was showing signs of fatigue from the constant adjustments required by changing conditions. Marcus's more flexible approach to energy management had allowed him to maintain steady performance, while his competitors' optimized systems struggled with non-optimal demands. The final event was the adaptability challenge that had been created specifically for this exhibition. None of the competitors had any prior experience with the obstacles and objectives they would face, making it a pure test of ability to develop new techniques under pressure. The arena transformed into a complex environment filled with obstacles that defied easy categorization. Competitors were given general objectives: reach certain locations, manipulate specific objects, navigate through challenging terrain, but no specific instructions about methods or techniques. The alien competitors approached the challenge by trying to apply their specialized skills to the new situations. Keth-Var Jr. attempted to use his optimized running form to navigate obstacles designed for different types of movement. Master Thorndex applied brute force to problems that required finesse. Precision seeker Yith-Kol tried to calculate exact solutions for situations that deliberately included random variables. Marcus treated the adaptability challenge like a playground where anything was possible. He experimented with different approaches to each obstacle, discarded methods that didn't work, and combined techniques from various activities to create solutions that hadn't existed before. When faced with a barrier that was too high to jump over and too strong to break through, most competitors tried to overcome it using their species' primary physical advantages. Marcus noticed that the barrier moved slightly when touched and realized it could be used as a lever to launch himself to areas that would otherwise be unreachable. An obstacle that required precise timing to navigate moving components defeated competitors who tried to calculate exact solutions. Marcus approached it like a double Dutch jump rope game, finding the rhythm through feel rather than analysis and improvising adjustments when the timing changed unexpectedly. The final challenge required competitors to work with a piece of equipment that none of them had ever seen before. It had multiple controls, moving parts, and functions that weren't immediately obvious. Most competitors tried to understand the device completely before attempting to use it. Marcus began experimenting immediately, treating the unknown equipment like a new piece of gym gear that needed to be figured out through trial and error. His willingness to fail repeatedly while learning allowed him to discover the device's capabilities much faster than competitors who were trying to avoid mistakes. "The human's approach appears completely illogical," observed Dr. Yinka. "He is making numerous errors and achieving suboptimal results. Yet he is the only competitor making progress toward the objective," noted tournament director Max Rim. "His errors are providing information that allows him to improve his approach continuously." When the adaptability challenge ended, Marcus had completed objectives that the other competitors were still trying to understand. His willingness to embrace failure as a learning tool had given him advantages that superior physical capabilities couldn't provide. The tournament results were announced to a stunned audience that included representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy. Marcus Reed, the human gym teacher, had won 4 of the 5 events and finished second in the 5th. The beings who had dominated galactic athletics for centuries had been defeated by an approach to competition that emphasized adaptation over optimization. "This outcome fundamentally challenges our understanding of athletic achievement," announced Elder Max Rim to the assembled delegates. "The human demonstrated that flexibility and creative problem-solving can overcome superior physical capabilities when conditions favor adaptability over specialization." The implications extended far beyond athletics. The alien competitors who had been defeated began studying Marcus's approaches, trying to understand how to incorporate adaptability into their own training methods. The concept of deliberately practicing for unpredictable situations was revolutionary in galactic sports culture. Keth-Var Jr. approached Marcus after the closing ceremonies with curiosity that had replaced his initial dismissiveness. "Your techniques appeared inefficient during our first meeting, yet they proved superior under competition conditions. How do you train for situations that have never occurred?" Marcus thought about how to explain 20 years of coaching philosophy to a being whose species had perfected athletic technique through centuries of optimization. "We don't train for specific situations. We train the ability to find solutions when we don't know what the problem will be." The conversation that followed led to the first cultural exchange program between Earth and the Galactic Athletic Federation. Coaches from various alien species would visit Earth to study human training methods, while human athletes and coaches would work with galactic sports programs to introduce adaptability principles. Champion Kilsa had perhaps the most profound realization of any competitor. "We have spent generations perfecting our techniques for known challenges," she observed. "But the human trained for unknown challenges. This is why our optimization became a limitation rather than an advantage." Master Thorndex's rocky surface shifted to colors that indicated deep contemplation. The human's strength was not in his muscles, but in his willingness to use strength differently when conditions required it. This suggests that our definition of athletic capability may be incomplete. The tournament's impact on galactic athletics was immediate and transformative. Sports programs across civilized space began incorporating unpredictability into their training methods. The concept of human-style coaching became synonymous with developing athletes who could perform under any conditions rather than just optimal ones. Marcus spent another week at the Stellar Coliseum, working with coaches and athletes who wanted to understand his training philosophy. The principles he shared weren't complex. Practice under changing conditions. Embrace failure as learning. Prioritize adaptation over perfection. but they represented a fundamental shift in how athletic development was approached. The return journey to Earth was handled with the same care as his original extraction, maintaining the fiction that he had been competing at a secret international training facility. When Marcus arrived home in Denver, he carried with him the knowledge that human athletic philosophy had just changed the course of galactic sports development. His wife Sarah noticed the change in him immediately. There was a confidence and perspective that hadn't been there before, though she couldn't identify its source given the cover story about his experience. "How did the competition go?" she asked over dinner on his first night back. Marcus smiled, thinking about how to answer truthfully without revealing the extraordinary reality of his experience. "I learned that our way of doing things, the way we train kids to adapt and improvise and never give up, that approach is more valuable than I ever realized." "Did you win?" "Let's just say I represented our philosophy well. And I think I made some friends who are going to change how they approach their own training because of what they learned from watching us." The following Monday, Marcus returned to Roosevelt High School to resume his duties as a gym teacher. His students noticed that he seemed even more enthusiastic about helping them develop adaptability and creative problem-solving through athletics. What they didn't know was that their coach had just proven to an entire galaxy that the principles he taught every day, work with what you have, adapt to changing conditions, turn disadvantages into advantages, could overcome any odds when applied with intelligence and determination. The gym teacher from Denver had become a galactic champion, not through superior physical ability, but by demonstrating that the human approach to athletics contained wisdom that the universe had been waiting to discover. In teaching aliens how to embrace imperfection and chaos as tools for achievement, Marcus had shown that Earth's greatest export might not be technology or resources, but the beautiful madness of human creativity applied to the simple goal of never giving up. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.